What it do? What it do? This is your boy Digital Pit Boss. And tonight we're gonna get it in to all my late nighters. Welcome to the show. This is the 501c3 and the church. What it do? What it do? This is your boy Digital Pit Boss. Hey, that was my little feedback. Sorry about that. Let me cancel that out so we can get it popping. Got some folks joining in. Welcome to the show. Okay, so definitely tonight we about to dig in, if you can, pass this link around somewhere online so we can get some more in the game. And we're going to take you guys on a little bit of journey, and we're going to float down memory lane here and get into it. We want to talk about this 501c3. So to get started, I think I'll start us off. I'm going to let you guys listen to a little video of a news clip of a pastor. He's going to talk about them meeting up with President Obama. This happened a little bit back in the days. And he's going to talk about what they done with the church and the 501c3. Y'all check it out.
Does President Obama get to 270 electoral votes? Well, his clearly strongest voter group is African Americans, and hundreds of preachers and other religious leaders are going to get a pep talk of sorts from members of the Congressional Black Caucus on how to combat the recent rise in voter ID laws. I'm joined now by the chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus, Congressman Emanuel Cleaver, Democrat from Missouri, who is also an ordained minister. Congressman, it's good to see you. Good morning.
Good to be with you.
So you've got this big summit tomorrow. Essentially, what is your message to several hundred clergy members, I understand, who will be there?
Yes, we'll have representatives from 9 denominations who actually pastor somewhere in the neighborhood of about 10 million people. And we're going to, first of all, equip them with the information they need to know about what they can say and what they cannot say in the church that would violate their 501c3 status with the IRS. In fact, we're going to have the IRS administrator there. We're going to have the Attorney General, Eric Holder, there. We're going to have the lawyers organization from around the country at ACLU, all giving ministers guidance on what they can and cannot do.
Boom. So there you have it. So what they were doing was they was coming together to talk about the 501c3, right? And find out what they can and cannot do. So let me share my screen here so we can get some things happening. And we won't take that off. So the first place I'm going to start, and let me click them around a little bit. Okay. So here we have the 501c3 tax guide. This is for churches and religious organizations, right? So this form is online at IRS. This is the breakdown of what you can and cannot do in order to be a 501c3 with a tax exemption to the church. And so we're going to get in a little bit. Let's see where we want to go to here. Let's see. Public listings and tax exempt organizations. Let's start at number 2, page 2. It's a little introduction. I'll move on down here. Let's see. Back at page 2. Okay. So this is an automatic exemption for churches. The church that meets the requirement of the IRC section 501c3 are automatically considered tax exempt and are not required to apply for or obtain recognition of tax exempt status from the IRS. Okay, so that's what happens when you qualify, right? So now let's get into how you can jeopardizing your tax-exempt status. All IRC Section 501c3 organizations, including churches and religious organizations, must abide by certain rules. Their net earning may not inure to any private shareholder or individual. Okay, so what that means is that the monies that they receive net, they may not inure to any private shareholder or individual. So you cannot give this money out to any private individual or a shareholder. This would cause you to jeopardize your tax-exempt status. Number two, they must not provide a substantial benefit to private interests. All right. So if you walk up in the church and you need $100 to pay a light bill, this is a little vague as far as what substantial is. That's pretty much a double-speak word, which not stating any particular amount of what substantial is. I guess they have to decide if $100 is not substantial, but $101 is substantial. That's somewhat vague. But definitely we can assume that $100,000 would be substantial in most people. So if you gave $100,000 to a particular individual, this could jeopardize your tax-exempt status. Number three, they must not devote a substantial part of their activities to attempting to influence legislation. Once again, we had that word substantial added with the word part, a substantial part, right, of their activities to attempting to influence legislation. So now, therefore, they can't do a lot to say, hey, let's vote for Obama. They can just, do very little to a specific influence in that regard. Okay, number four, they must not participate in or intervene in any political campaigns on behalf of or in opposition to any candidate for public office. Therefore, they can't be just for Republicans or just for Democrats or a specific candidate. If they do so, once again, they'll be jeopardizing their tax-exempt status. Number five, the organization's purpose and activities may not be illegal or violate fundamental public policy, right? So the organization's purposes and activities, of course, they can't be illegal. You can't be over there, backdooring a credit card scheme or, whatever you might be doing is illegal, right? Or fundamental public policies. All right. So this gets into the measures of lobbying activities and just pretty much details each specific aspect so that they'll understand what they could follow and what they cannot follow. Now, understanding if you want to remain tax exempt and you're living by these regulations that they have stated here in this 501c3 tax guide, that means you have lost control of the church. You're no longer in control of the church, right? So if you're not in control of the church, what have you done, right? So it says here, pastors, evangelists, missionaries, elders, deacons, watch this carefully because I need to make this abundantly clear. You have a 501c3 incorporated status. That means your church is the corporation of a state. That I, other preachers, and the IRS is trying to get you to understand about the contract. The creator of your church is the state because you have created an entity. That entity is being regulated by the state, which makes you a viable business, thus making your business non-taxable because you're collecting revenue on the corner of the state. And it says, number two, the state is the sole authority and sovereign head over your church. Why? because they've put limitations on you that you must obey. And should you disown yourself from these obligations, then by default, you would lose your status and you would owe tax money for all the money you've collected under the 501c3 status. Okay? Your church is subject to the laws of the state, which limits its powers. Your church has no constitutionally protected rights. Your church is an artificial person. Your church submits to a state charter, declaring it a creature of the state. Your church is created for the benefit of the public. Your church is a state franchise. You can look most church up. Once they become a franchise, you could find them. You can type in 501c3 churches, put in the name of the particular church you're interested in, and they should pop up and you should see the status and understand how they're formed, right? Your church is privileged, grants, and granted by the state. All right. So now, a 501c3 corporation, being an artificial person, is not considered a person under the First Amendment to the United States Constitution, Religious Liberty Clause, or under the Fifth Amendment to the United States Constitution, protecting against self-incrimination clause. Therefore, an incorporated church has no First or Fifth Amendment right. In the case of Johnson versus Goodyear, 127 Cal 4, 1899, a corporation, being an artificial person, only has rights within the meaning of the Due Process and Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution and similar provisions of state constitutions and within the meaning of the state status. This is how you set up a 501c3 church. Let's go down here a little bit, see what else we can find. Okay, it says, if your church signed a 501c3 contract, then the IRS has every right to tell your church what they can and cannot preach. If God was the creator of your church, then God tells the church what it can and cannot preach. But that all changes as soon as your church signs and dates the document. Christians may ask to see the law that binds preachers down from what they can and cannot say. And the answer is no. There is no law I can point to, but there also does not have to be. All Congress has to do is grant the IRS carte blanche privileges, full discretionary power to do what they see fit. And it has the same effect as law. But if you've signed a contract with them, you do not need a law because you gave up your rights and agreed to obey their statutes for regulating a church, and it is legally binding on top of the discretionary enforcement. So prior to 1954, churches were free to evaluate the position of political candidates on moral issues without fear of the Internal Revenue Service revoking their tax-exempt status. That year, the Senator Lyndon Johnson amended the tax code and added a threat of IRS actions against the church if their pastor mentions the position of specific candidates from the pulpit. Citing the rule, groups like the AU, the American United, have repeatedly threatened to report churches to the IRS if they speak out on such issues. So that's just an opportunity where things happen, right? This is going all the way back to 1954. So now, how did we get here, right? Why did we get here? For that, we got to kind of move over into what happened in 54, and again, what happened under under Bush, right? So under Bush, think it was like 2001. Hold on one second. Let me pull this page up. Go back a little bit here. And they had the White House Faith-Based Initiative. This was a Bush program, right? So it says, let's blow this up a little bit. Under George Washington Bush, the OFBCI was established by President George Washington Bush through the executive order on January 29th, 2001, representing one of the key domestic policies of Bush campaign, promise of compassionate conservatism. The initiative sought to strengthen faith-based and community organizations to expand their capacity to provide federally funded social services, with the idea of having been that these groups were well situated to meet the needs of local individuals. As Texas governor, Bush had used the charitable choice provisions of the 1996 welfare reform, which allowed faith-based entities to compete for the government contracts to deliver social programs. To support the work of faith-based groups in Texas, critical in social service, community services with health care financing is the overall effort of the combined budgets and the finance in these areas representing established religions in the U.S. So going all the way back to 2001 in modern time, it's George Bush creating a faith-based initiative program to give churches the ability to get money from the government, right? Now, you can't apply for this money if you're not a 501c3 tax exempt church, for the very reason that this is a payoff, somewhat like hush money, if you want to say. And with this hush money, they're able to institute control over the church, thus taking away the ability to for the church to have its own leadership and direction of how it would like to guide the people under Christ. So if Christ was to disagree with one of these IRS jeopardizing circumstances that we read earlier, then what would happen if Christ was to send a message to one of these pastors to say, well, you know, I got one of my men running for office and I'm going to have the church to support him and get him in the office. Well, if they violated any of these rules and they were forced to lose this status and be forced to pay, they may not choose to do it. And thus, it takes away who's running the church. Now, there are some churches, a small percentage, I would say probably about 5% of all the 80,000 churches that's set up across the nation that are not a 501c3 church. And if you're not a 501c3 church, then you're the type of church that has to pay taxes on your land, your building, the money, the income that you collect. But you have full regulation over what you choose to do for God within that church structure, as you heard a little bit earlier, right? So now I wanted to drop a little something so show how far back this goes. This is my man Marcus Garvey, little biography on Marcus Garvey, right? So you can find this on biography.com. You know, just type in Marcus Garvey. When you get there, you'll find this page. And, you know, you can read a little bit about his life. And, you know, I talk a lot about Garvey, so I'm not here to go in depth about everything. I'm just here. Uh-oh, 1 second. Boom. Let's get rid of that. Okay, so, yeah, I'm just here to kind of lay a little groundwork out at a specific point when he was being deported, right? So it says, by 1919, Marcus Garvey and the UNIA had launched the Black Star Line, a shipping company that would establish trade and commerce between Africa's and Americas, the Caribbean, South and Central America, Canada, and Africa. At the same time, Garvey started the Negro Factories Association, a series of companies that would manufacture marketable commodities in every big industry centered in the Western Hemisphere and Africa. In August 1920, the UNI claimed 4 million members and held its first international convention at Madison Square Garden in New York City before a crowd of 25,000 people from all over the world. Marcus Garvey spoke of having pride in African history and culture. Many found his words inspiring, but not all. Some established Black leaders found his separatist philosophy ill-conceived. W.D. Du Bois, a prominent Black leader and officer of the NAACP, called Garvey the most dangerous enemy of the Negro race in America. Garvey felt Du Bois was an agent for the white elite. Now, here's a few names. We got Garvey, we got Du Bois, and we got the NAACP. Now, I've had a few conversations with these Kemetic Pan-Africanists, several Pan-Africanists who are just absolutely convinced that W.D. Du Bois was a Pan-Africanist. So here we are in 1920, Pan-African Central. And Garvey feels like Du Bois is an agent for white elite. That don't sound like a Pan-African to me. Not if Garvey feels that way about you. About Garvey. He feels that Garvey is the most dangerous enemy of the Negro race. What is dangerous about this man who created the Black Star Line and these Negro factory associations? And he trying to build up economics, business, right? Now, the reason I pulled this up to lay this groundwork out in connection to the 501c3 church is because at this particular time, W.D. Du Bois is an atheist and Garvey is a Christian. And there is no 501c3 in 1920, so definitely any types of organizations that are Christian-based dealing with Garvey is not under a 501c3. Because that didn't happen until 1954. But Pan-Africanism is in full effect. They got 4 million members. It's building an industrial age for Black people. And you got W.D. Du Bois at the head of undermining this process. And somehow, in 2016, you got men like Leonard Jeffries and others who want to point towards Du Bois. You got these fools call themselves the conscious community that want to argue with me about Booker T and Garvey. They don't. They kind of flow with Garvey. They like Garvey. He brought them the flag, the red, black, and green, but they're confused about W.D. Du Bois because W.D. Du Bois is connected to the NAACP, and now the NAACP is a movement for civil rights, which we're going to get to this 501c3 after I lay this down a little bit and let y'all understand that Garvey didn't feel any type of way that Du Bois was a Pan-African. He couldn't be in 1920 when he felt that way about Marcus Garvey, and everybody in 2016 loves Marcus Garvey, right? Okay, so let's take a look at that NAACP. They have something called the Spingarn Medal. First medal was given out the year Booker T dies, 1915, to Ernest E. Just, a biologist. Now, what's interesting about this list, which I've studied all these names, you guys can check this list out, click on them, walk through them. If you're a fan of non-economic liberalism, you're going to love this list. If you're a fan of the NAACP, you're going to love this list. If you're for civil rights, you're going to love this list. But this list is not Pan-Africans on this list, I guarantee you. Now, you notice in 1920, the same year we just read about, W.D. Du Bois, William E.B. Du Bois, the author and founder of the NAACP, which we know he's the front man founder. That's why you can't trust Wikipedia all the way. You got to know what you're doing when you deal with this thing. But nevertheless, the award is Spingard. And the question is, who is Spingard? Well, that's Joel Spingard. Here he is right here. Joel Illis Spingard, chairman of the board of the NAACP. So he's the chairman, and this is the founder. So he must have went to the chairman and spoke up the idea, and the chairman went and got the money. If you want to give him them type of titles. But nevertheless, as you walk down this list, you're going to see, look, my man George Washington Carver made it on this list. He's a botanist. They didn't give many awards to people who was over there in Tuskegee, but, you know, it's kind of hard to not look at what George Washington Carver was doing in 1923 when then he then reinvented 1,000 things, cotton production, paints, and all types of inventions that he's responsible over there. They just pretty much had to throw something at him not to appear to be so prejudiced about who gets these awards. But here's the thing about the NAACP is the whole idea of the NAACP was to get our minds on civil rights and integration way back since 1915 with Ernest E. J. getting the first award and W.D. Du Bois founding the organization, and I believe in 2009. Okay. So as we walk down this list and we see every year somebody's getting the award, right? In 1927, Marcus Garvey is deported due to the ambushing of W.D. Du Bois in 1920. He gets caught up. Let's go back. Let me show y'all how that happened, right? Let me go back over here to Garvey, right? So let's get this. In 1922, Marcus Garvey and 3 others of the UNIA officials was charged with mail fraud involving the Black Star Line. The trial records indicated several improprieties occurred for the prosecution of the case. It didn't help that the shipping line's books contained many accounting irregularities. On June 23, 1923, Garvey was convicted and sentenced to prison for 5 years, claiming to be a victim of the political motivation masquerade of justice. Garvey appealed his conviction and was denied. In 1927, he was released from prison and deported. All right. So he was deported in 1927. So from 23, 24, 25, he's not there. Now look at what these people do for a living. Here you have a singer, a poet, a historian, a businessman, an author, an educator, a principal, an actor. Here you got the principal of Tuskegee. Now, you know, they're infiltrated by this time because Booker T then passed away in 1915 and Garvey is deported, and boy, you got a different kind of black man in the game now. So as you see, they starting to move over there to Tuskegee and hand out a few awards. So the principal get one, the dean gets one, and we're back on educators and activists, educators, opera singers, surgeons, authors, labor leaders, jurists and educators and physicians and singers and lawyers and research chemists. What you're not finding on this is any STEM-based educations. They don't win any awards. These awards go to literary art majors. That's what these types of people are. All of this is literary arts in the sense. It's not a STEM-based education necessarily. The country is going in a different direction, right? So, 1954, a philanthropist, a physician, and an educator, Theodore K. Lawless, right? He get the award that year for whatever he did. And now you have integration fully in effect. 54, they create the 501c3. Now they got to get the churches to get behind it and start to support this White House faith-based initiative. Going back before Bush, as we read a little earlier. This is what is happening in this 501c3 program within the Black church. They're using the NAACP and the civil rights organizations to push this through among Black folks, to go for it, to sign up for it. Because once they have control over the church, which is where the body of Black folks congregate. Now, if you was to align all the churches to say, well, you know, Black people are tired of being shot down in the streets, and we don't want to, you know, support gay marriage or whatever the particular focus would be, they couldn't put too much on top of being one mind and saying we're going to force laws through Congress, because they have already signed a contract that states that you can't involve yourself too deeply. You can't get too deep. They must not devote a substantial part of their activities to attempting to influence legislation. This is part of this tax exempt status. See, so you're forcing the church's hand that if there's an interest of the people, they couldn't all come together and call up every pastor around the country and say, hey, look, we're going to take all the Black churches and we're going to march and we're going to talk about this from the pulpit, and we're going to get our congregation to understand what's going on, and we're going to make a big move all together, all 45 million of us. Oh no, before you could put that together, the IRS will be at your door holding this piece of paper, this contract, saying, hey, look, you guys have agreed that you wouldn't do this. If you pursue this, we're going to ask for our money. If you don't give us our money, we're going to close the doors on your church, and you ain't going to be collecting no money no more. You have to revert back to a taxable institution, and you're going to have to pay back the millions of dollars you would owe in taxes, which they may not have at the time they would want that money. This is what it means when you go to a church and they say, have you joined the church? They're not asking if you've joined God's kingdom. They want to know, have you joined this organization that they have filed on paper? Have you filled out your paperwork and become an organized member of the church so you could be held responsible for this 501c3 tax exempt status? They have to show how many members are in the church to make certain on the claims that they make. So if you got 10,000 members collecting $20 a piece per week, let's say only 50% give you $20. So you got 5,000 people giving you $20. That's a nice chunk of change. 5,000 times 20. That goes a long way. 4 times a month. And we know darn well that more money than that goes into a church of that magnitude. 5,000 members on a Sunday. There's many churches in Georgia that hold service with that type of number. Creflo Dollars and Eddie Longs and several others. So this is a lot of money on the line here that we're talking about, that the government, and that's the donations. That has nothing to do with the church initiative that the government is handing out so that the churches can operate social programs with government money, whatever that means. See, all these words that they use on legal and legalities are very vague, and you're not really sure how to pinpoint what a specific phrase is saying, because they use vague language until you get in court with the lawyers. Then they scrutinize this paperwork with a more critical eye, and they come up with exact meaning for things that appear to be vague. And then all of a sudden you find out who's in control of the church. And that's how you end up with anybody other than Jesus Christ or the Mashiach or Jehovah, or whatever name you call it, the Most High, the universal God, is no longer in control of the church, not the 501c3 church. And so this is a subject that most people on Sunday Christians, they've never heard of a 501c3. They just go to church, do service, give their donation, and go home. They have no idea the paperwork of a church and how things work on the back end. But those that operate and run the church, they know very well how this works. They know very well. They apply for those church initiative funds that they receive. The bigger the church, the bigger the billing. That's how you end up buying jets for ridiculous amounts of money. So this was just a short one, y'all, just to give a little background, a little breakdown. You know, if anybody got any, what's up with you, David World? Peace to you, brother. Welcome to the show. And let me cancel this. Stop that. Back at you. Yeah, if anybody got any questions or something you want to drop it in the comment section, you want me to talk about before I shut the show down, or you know, if you want to come in on a comment, you want me to send out the link, you know, you can write something in there. If not, I probably got a little bit more I want to talk about, then I'm gonna shut this down. But most definitely, for those who never heard of the 501c3, you should definitely take a moment and pull it up and check out the actual form, which you can find at irs.gov, 501c3 tax guide for churches and religious organizations. And then it's pretty long. It's about 36 pages in all. And you should really take a moment to read through that. If you are like a member who actually goes to a particular church, you should point this out, ask some questions, you know, because if you could understand how by being a 501c3 removes Christ as the head of the church, then that's not a church that we should be involved with leading us. Because if you're following the Bible and you're attending a church, you should definitely understand that Christ has to be the head of the church at all times. So it doesn't even matter if the preacher says, well, Christ is the head of the church, and I don't care about no paperwork. That's a lie. That's a lie. That's why he signed it. Because when it comes to getting that money and paying these light bills and that IRS knocking on your door, oh, they're going to care, and they're going to move quickly to do what the IRS is asking. This is the government's way of secretly having a hand on the church. That's why there are times when you wonder why the church won't come out and talk about specific topics. Well, this is the reason. They're bound to certain conditions, paperwork. Well, it's a little late. We're going into 12:32 a.m. tonight. That's my particulars on the 501c3 in the church. Definitely share the link. Let people know about it. This is your boy, the Digital Pit Boss. To all my late nighters, peace and blessings. And with that, I'm out.